So, Yasmin, I spoke with you 2 years ago about creativity, and over the last couple of years, I'm sure so much has happened, especially now during the pandemic. You've had to draw on, we've all had to draw on our creative resources in so many different ways. So, what has changed for you over the last 2 years, if anything?
Goodness, the last 2 years has been huge since I last spoke with you. I don't know where to start. How would you like me to start? What, just telling you about my practice, or telling you about all the other bits and pieces?
Last time we talked about your work, and this time the focus is more on presence, emergence, and impact. So the way you work, maybe it's created an emergence of new possibilities and new opportunities.
Oh, definitely in terms of impact. Because 2 years ago, when we last spoke, I was just beginning to work with a new material, which is a material that can absorb pollution from the air. And so it was a huge amount of process, research and development. And the wonderful thing is that during COVID, during quarantine, I managed to finish the first public sculpture that's gone into the Horniman Museum Gardens. And what's great about that is that apparently excess pollution actually stops bees finding their pollinating flowers. So for me, this has been, first of all, it's a dream project, because you're putting a piece of public art in a place that needs it, and it's making a difference. And all the flowers that are surrounding the sculpture are all bee-loving flowers. And I think, certainly for me, in terms of how do we communicate a very important message, which, you know, let's face it, climate change and what we've been going through is quite scary. How do we communicate it in a positive way? And this has shown me that it's possible. So that's one of the big impactful things. And the other thing is that I notice people are now listening. So for me, I guess I've become a bit of an environmental activist. It's snuck up on me. And in terms of sustainability, if you think about museums now, the museum I'm working with, the Horniman, the CEO there was the very first one to declare a culture emergency. And there are other museums following in its way. And what that means is that we have to be aware, for example, when we're mounting exhibitions, you know, what is the carbon footprint of flying artwork and everything halfway around the world? What type of materials do you use to create works which are then destroyed? So this for me is really exciting and very promising. And then of course I've joined Culture Declares an Emergency, where whether you're a musician or a business or an artist, you sign up to something that simply says, I'm becoming aware of this in my work, I'm trying to address it, I'm trying to share it. So it's a time of enormous change, but for me, I think in terms of the creative thinking, it couldn't have happened without the collaboration of an enormous amount of different people who think very differently. So 2 years ago, I think we spoke much more about this in theory, but now I've been actually putting it into practice, and it works.
Yeah, that leads me to this very, very important question about creativity being a collaboration of many people rather than one individual. Creativity doesn't occur in isolation. It always occurs in a context, and that context can include other people or other resources or wisdom from, you know, many different places, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. As I kind of said, I would not have been able to do this without like the head horticulturist, Wesley Shaw at the Horniman. I didn't know what plants he was going to plant around the sculpture, and when I saw it a few weeks ago, wow, it was like he had created the most beautiful sort of floral backdrop to this piece. And then the amount of willing I had just before quarantine, when people would last minute weld and last minute help me. And what I've seen, and they're all doing it either for no money or very little. So what I've seen is that when people believe in, I guess I'm driving this, so when they believe in your vision, they get on board. And then it becomes really exciting. And then a few weeks ago, I was helping to run a whole online sustainability conference. And that was mostly with scientists and engineers. They asked me as an artist, I think, in terms of narrative, because one of the things I think artists are very good at is bringing threads together and sort of telling a bigger picture. And it worked beautifully. But what I came out with from the end of that, because I had to listen to pretty much everything and summarize it, is that we have all the innovations, we have all the solutions, We just now need the will, and certainly in terms of, you know, other things, we need legislation. So we need
yeah, the bars went red again.
sorry darling, sorry.
Okay, so presence in terms of an individual and presence in terms of a team, huge
Yes.
difference, right? So the emergence, you know, what can emerge from an individual person's vision or an individual person's creation is very different to what can emerge when there's a group of you working together.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And this is one of the things that's so exciting. I don't know a great deal about plants. I didn't know very much about bees. I certainly don't know a huge amount about the real engineering of something. But when you kind of say to people, this is what I want to do, how do we do it? If they are can-do people, and that's the big thing, you need people who are, yeah, we can do that. Let's just figure out how we do it. Then amazing things can happen. And I've been speaking to other people across all sorts of industries. I think that's one of the other things that's happened in the last 2 years since I've seen you. My networks have really blossomed, and they include everyone from, you know, people who are in investments to, as I say, people who grow things. And as an artist, I guess it's my job to kind of think, right, how can I find this common language? Because I think that's the problem. It's finding, we all speak with these various different languages, and you think, how can I find the common things that everyone will understand so that they can release what they already naturally do? We're not asking people to do anything that they don't normally do, and join it to what other people do. And certainly during quarantine, the other thing that's fascinated me is I was doing a couple of watercolor studies just for myself, and I did a couple of time-lapse videos. And the response to that when I was posting them was amazing, Jesvir, because people went, "Oh God, I didn't realize you could do things like this." And I've just got my brushes out, and I've just got my paints out. And I noticed during quarantine that people were suddenly starting to go back. It gives you a buzz. You don't need to go shopping. You don't need to consume. You don't need to.
So you were talking about your networks having flourished, and I think that's an important element in creativity, that a lot of creativity happens through these networks, which lead to an emergence of things that were totally unforeseen, unimaginable.
Yeah, yeah. And it's about, and these are simple conversations that start, you know. I think that's the other thing. I think it's, for me, it's, you know, I'm not networking with an agenda as such. You kind of, it's interesting to meet people who are very, very different to you, and they're obviously really fascinating. And then before you know it, you find that there are common threads, and then you have an idea. So it's very organic, and it can't be empirical. You can't think, oh, this is the end outcome. So it's, you know, in terms of the future, when I think Dan Pink is one of my favorite writers, and he talks about the future, you know, being obviously a conceptual one, and this idea of high concept and high touch. So empathy and meaning and purpose and, you know, pattern making. And I can see all of that happening, but I guess what's difficult about it is that you can't quantify it. You know, we're so used to wanting to quantify these measurables, and you can't. And I experienced that, well, you can kind of, but I experienced that this week, because the sculpture is doing its job in the museum, but how can you tell with a personal sense of self-esteem and confidence when you're doing something that you feel is authentic, and you're communicating with other people in an authentic way? That's something that's very important personally as well. So this is not, when I think of the creativity thing, it's not just in terms of the outcome and the thing that you produce, but definitely, and it sounds like such a cliche, the journey and the way that it makes you feel as you're going. So it's a very exciting time, at a time of, let's face it, you know, I hate that word unprecedented, but it is unprecedented. But sometimes I think perhaps we needed this. You know, sometimes you need to be at the edge of a chasm in order to kind of go, what do I need to change? And for me personally, I want to try and help continue this change. I don't want us to lapse back to what we were before, Jasmine, because it was a bit rubbish, really.
Yeah, there are, you know, there are people who are just waiting for things to go back to normal, and there are others who are saying, well, no, you know, how could we possibly have lived and worked that way? And but you mentioned this thing about authenticity, And
Yes.
when we think about presence, there is like a huge difference between presence, being authentic, and that false presence, you know, the like the stage presence sometimes, you know, when there is an agenda, when it's not the real person that we're seeing, it's the person who is trying to deliver an outcome. Whereas with emergence, it's not about outcomes, because we don't, it's unplanned, isn't it?
Yes, it is unplanned. And that's, I have a dear friend who has two rules. And I think he's managed to stick to them. One is only do the work that you want to do and only work with the people that you like, which, you know, is a bit of a privilege if you can. But you tend to find that the people that you get on with, they become very easy to work with as well. There's no effort. And whatever obstacles there are, you can always get around them. And I think the more you work with people like that, and the more they see the outcomes, eventually, the more people want to get involved. And that's the thing that I am experiencing. So it's because when I first started, people were going, well, how can it absorb pollution? I had so much resistance to this work. You know, the science has been done, but I'm not doing this as a scientist, so I don't have to keep reiterating it. But in terms of, if you think now, certainly with public art, if you think that we can't travel, we can't have experience or sort of different experiences by traveling anymore, not quite so easily. So for me, culture and art and things that you can, and obviously nature, these are the things that can transport you, you know, somewhere else in your psyche, so that, you know, maybe you can look at things from a slightly different perspective. Because I think, again, that's what, and I've experienced it myself with emergence, if you like. As much as I like to imagine that I have an open mind, I am aware that I have cognitive biases. So this idea of metacognition as well, thinking through the way that you think. But the more people that you meet, the more people who kind of challenge your perspectives, the better it is. And again, if you think of the current world, we're so polarized in our thinking. So I think, again, this idea of creative thinking, networking, emergence, it balances you out. You know, you're being tested all the time in the way that you think about things. So it's kind of, again, kind of exciting. Sorry, I sound so excited about everything at a really negative time. But when you've had so much resistance to what you're doing, all of a sudden to find that it is at a time like this that people are prepared to listen, you go, actually, I realized that I used to think, Jesvir, that ideas were everything, right? That if you had a brilliant idea, I now realize it's timing. Timing is the most crucial thing of all. It doesn't matter how brilliant the idea is, how innovative it is. If people aren't ready to hear, it's very difficult to proceed. But right now, I think people are prepared to hear.
And it also has to be the right place as well. So you know, you need to be at the right time, in the right place, with the right people.
Yes, no, absolutely. And that's kind of been happening to me, because I think you lay this is the thing, you don't realize you're doing it. And it's about trust when you're working with people, and people knowing that you can deliver, and vice versa. And then it all starts to come together beautifully in a really, because these projects, they take time, they don't happen overnight. And obviously with an awful lot of these things, I'm the one that's driving them. And I guess what I realized for me is now my focus is so clear, which I probably wasn't before. I still create work from a point of intuition. I don't really think about why I'm making what I make anymore. I just know that at the end, it will reveal itself, because obviously the story is running in my head all the time. I don't need to go and look for it. And as an artist, that again is incredibly exciting, because you think this is authentic work. I'm not making stuff that's necessarily fashionable. I'm not making stuff that people are requiring me to make. I'm making it because I need to make it and I want to make it. And hopefully I can drag other people with me.
And as the driver of this project, your presence, you know, I suppose in some ways you act as a catalyst for you influence others, even unconsciously.
Yeah, no, what's been lovely is I've been working with another company, a little company I've been working with called Public Art UK. Now they're fascinating. What they do is they go all the way around the country and they film pieces of public art. They drone footage them, they photograph them. They've been doing this themselves because they want to make art less elitist. They want to make it for everyone. And we started collaborating last year, and I suddenly realized the enormous scope of what they could do. And I wanted to involve them in the Horniman Museum project because, again, in terms of quarantine, because we couldn't physically go into places, you think, how can you start communicating the collections and things that we have using a screen? So they have gone off to do some footage, and I know the museum's now going to have them back. We're looking at AR, we're looking at 3D rendering. So that's another big thing that's happened to me in the last 2 years, Jesvir. I've stopped being a bit of a technophobe because I was frightened of it, And now that I'm working with people who understand all that much better, I'm starting to see the possibilities of having one idea or one concept, and the fact that it can be scaled up, it can be scaled down, it can be used with other things. So that's very, very exciting. 3D printing always kind of left me a bit dry, but now that I can see the possibilities of 3D printing, and that it doesn't need to be made from throwaway plastic, it can be made from natural materials. So with Public Art UK, it's great because I think I'm helping them to see this, what they're capable of. And this is great. This is what you want in a project. It's not just about me. It's not just about what I'm getting out of it. It's a joy to see that other people can expand. And obviously, you need to monetize some of this. It's all very well and good doing this, but you have to earn a living from doing it. So I think we're all getting much more creative in terms of the way that we can earn from it. And in terms of artists, I think it's our thinking. And this is something I've been talking about and writing about recently. It's not just what we create, it's the way that we think. And I'm hoping that more and more companies will realize that they have to have at least one artistic designer, creative, whatever, on their board, so that they can, again, see things from a slightly different perspective. So I think that's coming. I'm hoping that that's coming, Jasmine.
Okay, excellent. So in terms of presence, emergence and impact, just to summarize then, what is your approach to taking an emergent way of doing things?
What do you mean? What do you mean?
So as opposed to the outcomes-based approach, like very many projects, they have a clear outcome. Whereas if you take an emergent approach, those outcomes may never be realized because you might realize somewhere down the line.
Oh, yeah. So certainly for me, in terms of emergence, it's about sharing. I've been sharing a lot of ways of doing things. I have no idea how other people are going to go off and work with those or do things with those, but they will do it with their families and their kids. It's about trying to say, as an artist, everyone is effectively creative, every single person. Don't imagine that you have to create a masterpiece to be able to say that you're creative. You don't. It's everything from the little small acts that we do every day, sort of the things that we do in our professions. And that to me also leads to the big paradigm shifting stuff. So I think it's about empowering people. It's about giving people permission to go and play. And I have no idea what they will do with that, but the fact that somebody said it's okay to mess up, to take risks, to make a mess, or whatever it is it's great. So from that point of view, I can see the impact from what I'm doing, but from the things that I'm hopefully feeding to other people, or the ideas, or the inspiration, or I have no idea where that will go.
And it's that's what's exciting. It's like when you don't have any idea of where it will go, that's when you're at the edge of that cliff, and that's where it takes courage to be there in that place at the edge of the unknown.
I think all innovation is like that, and you have to be. I guess I've been self-employed most of my life, so I've always been at the risky end of things, and you kind of get used to it. Sometimes it would not be, but not everyone can live like that, and I understand that. But you can inspire people to have small elements of it in their life, because change only comes about if you're doing something that's slightly out of your comfort zone. For me, the best stuff that I've ever made is when I was way beyond the edge of my comfort zone. And if it hadn't been for all the others, so for example, when we were making a much bigger sculpture for Euston, which hasn't gone up yet, I was panicking about the engineering. I was panicking about the idea of this thing not coming off the wall. And at one point, one of the engineers, Robert, said, Jasmine, you've got to stop worrying about that. That's the thing that we are good at. You need to think about what it is you want to make and how you want to make it, and we will do the rest. And I think it's that's the thing. It's about having that trust as well, that you can do something that somebody else will take responsibility for the bits that you know you can't do. And I've now lost my thread of thought. So give me another question.
Yeah. Well, it was just to wrap up, Jasmine. I think that's you've wrapped up quite well in saying that creativity, it is about working together and sharing and collaborating.
Did you get everything you needed? Sorry, when I go off on a tangent, it's like, did I actually answer?
That's fine. Yeah, that's fine. It's just, everyone has a different perspective on presence, emergence, and you being an artist, you obviously have a very different approach compared with, let's say, a business person, or business person who's not necessarily an artist. So everyone has their different perspectives, and I think that there's this linguistic misunderstanding between, like, some people say, oh, I'm not creative, and it's just a linguistic misunderstanding, because what their meaning of creativity is different to somebody like yourself and myself, who will say, well, yeah, everyone's creative, because we can be creative in simply being present and being a catalyst. That is also creative, because we might not have created something ourselves, but we have spurred somebody on to take action. And that's
why what you're doing is so important as well. I will obviously be following up much more what you're doing this time. But yes, you bring all these things together. And again, there's all the Zoom conferences and meetings and stuff. What again has been really nice is that people who are normally too busy to pick up the phone to respond or write an email, they're much more available. And I found I've been able to speak to many more people than I normally would have been able to. So how have you found, because you've obviously been doing this for a while, what outcomes have you found for yourself, Jesvir?
Well, it's emergent. This is like the fourth year. Yeah, it's very powerful. And I've spoken with, probably nearing 200 people altogether now about creativity. So that is very powerful in itself. And next year, I'm sure next year will be the 5th year. And I think when I started, I aimed to do 5. And I'm pretty sure it won't be the last one that I will do. But that was, in my mind, I thought I'll do 5 years of these and see how it goes. But what's emerging now, it just, we don't know what's going to happen in a year's time. We didn't know the pandemic was going to hit this year. So there is that unknown. But where I'm going with this is that it will, like in years to come, it will show the evolution of the discourse around creativity.
And are you seeing it? Have you seen a change over the 4 years? Have you, certainly now, do you think now is a really ripe time for this to come out? What's been your experiences from what people, sorry, I'm just curious from what people have been saying. Have you,
well, I think,
are we gathering traction?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the pandemic has, in a way, it's especially like during the furlough period, people have got the time to think to themselves. And as you and I both know, creativity does require a lot of incubation time, doesn't it? It doesn't happen, like at the click of the fingers. And so a lot of people who were trapped in this kind of busy work life, where they had very little time to think about anything that was really meaningful to them, at least they've had 3 or 4 months of time out where they can go, think about what they really want to do, rather than simply going back to work as normal, which most people won't be able to do.
No. And thank you for asking me again. So